Well, don't we all wish we had a couple of hours with this mob? This is a pretty impressive panel here. We won't waste any time, but it's great to be here with you today, and they were very inspiring conversations. It'll be really good to dig them open and add more aspects to them along those four themes that we're talking about. Firstly, though, can I introduce you to Sandy Pitcher? Sandy, can I invite you to just speak for a few minutes? Each panel member is going to speak briefly to us, then I'm going to ask some questions, then I hope you'll ask questions. So can you please start thinking of some rich, deep, complex questions that'll take us bang out of the stereotypes, because we've all been to plenty of stereotypical conversations about the future. This is clearly not one of those already. So start thinking about the question you'd like to ask. Sandy, could I ask you to speak?
Thanks, Gabe, and all of my colleagues would love your rich, deep, complex questions. I'll have your Dorothy Dixes, thanks. I suppose I get to talk, and being the CEO of the Environment Department, green is the focus of the four pillars of the council vision that is the one that I'm here to speak about. But I think I'm probably no orphan on this panel of just wanting to make the point that to have a carbon neutral city, to be thinking green and sustainability, is absolutely the description of what livability is. How we're going to get there is being a smart city, a gig city, and who is going to be part of the transition to what that means. It's creativity, it's being a part of a creativity city. So I feel like the four pillars are so bold, but they're also so cleverly interlinked, and I feel like the real strength of where we're going to get to and make Adelaide just this most amazing place that we already know is there in this kernel, and we are growing towards being even more so. It really is the interlink and the clever way that we'll be able to make all of those things play together. And certainly when Minister Ma was talking about the gig city and precincts, and we're talking about how do we make carbon neutrality as a real living, breathing thing that people understand in this city, we're saying let's get the precincts and make those real and show what carbon neutrality can mean on the ground to those people who live it. So I'm excited about what feels like the way that we can actually make people understand this vision and live it. And I think there's something great about the word green. It captures many things, and one of the things that Adelaide has about its very existence is our ring of our parklands and the green square, I suppose, that surrounds us. And I actually think there's something really iconic that we can do about the parklands, so I'm interested in the vision there. And then I also think, and this is just because I'm biased deeply, but the Botanic Gardens, which is actually one of the treasures that we have in our city, and it is in our city, and it's one of the most visited places in our city. And we have such an opportunity, I think, to really bring the Botanic Gardens and what we can do with those gardens as part of a green, livable, smart, creative place. The opportunity is huge for us, and the Old Ra development being intrinsically in the doorstep of the Botanic Gardens and the whole Riverbank precinct is an exciting place for the City Council and the government to work together on. And the fact that we are working genuinely so well together and actually just thinking about, exactly as the Lord Mayor said, how we can live in this moment but plan for the future. I just think that encapsulates what is so great about what we're talking about today, and I'm excited to think about what next.
Thanks, Sandy. That's terrific. Nick, could I ask you to join in?
Thank you. I think it's really interesting that when we think about the future city, we say we're running towards it. Well, I actually think we're not, or I think we're here. It's just that some people don't know we are. And I think there's pockets of being in the future. But there's some great examples why we need to kind of blur the boundaries between the silos. And a great example of that was last week I was at the Top 100 Business Index. And we heard about these amazing 100 companies in Adelaide being celebrated for their amazing work, and so they should be. There's some great companies that have done amazing things. And then as the day went on, we heard about how they were successful and the key elements of business success. And what I was quite shocked about was that the big C word wasn't discussed. No one in business that was having a dialogue about the top 100 companies mentioned the C word. The C word was vacant from the whole discussion. And I found that to be curious, because creativity is the biggest driver for the world's leading companies. It's the biggest driver for economies reinventing themselves. There's so many Small businesses, large businesses, and economies of varying scales have used creativity to reinvent themselves, to repurpose themselves. And I was very, very curious that there was no mention of art, architecture, design, or even creative thinking and solutions in those top 100. I'm sure there is so much there, but I thought that the rhetoric seemed to be so part of the past. And that one of the things that I think is critical is that we look at creativity as a really important way of making this city memorable. Because one of the things I know from the world I live in is that people are hungry for creative pursuits that give them unique experiences in our world. Technology offers us access to lots of different things. So we're always chasing the unique, always trying to find something that's memorable. That's why we travel more. That's why we pursue entertainment and leisure activities, because we want something that's quite unique. And so the future city of Adelaide is about trying to find a place that is unique, that is about experiences, that is about memorable notions of who we are in terms of place and space. And I think the arts offers that. The city in some ways has become lazy and reliant on our festival format, where we have all this activity and then we kind of go into a doldrum for a few months. For arts and culture to truly have a sustainable role in our city, we need to infill the troughs and truly have a dynamic city. And that's what I think the future looks like.
Thank you very much, Nick. David Homburg.
Look, Nick, I didn't pay Nick to lay the groundwork for me like that, but that was just beautiful because I have a proposition here. I want to talk about the implementation of the plan and how we actually get to 2020 and delivering on all those goals, because I think design has a role in that. I think when people think about design, they often think about the aesthetic component. You know, we do cool stuff, we do beautiful things. But that's really, to pick up on the 80-20 rule, that's only 20% of what we do as designers. 80% of what we do is things like strategy. You know, we can pull together multiple threads of seemingly disconnected things and work the alchemy on them and create strategy out of some stuff that is seemingly disconnected. So that's one thing. More importantly, and tying back to the topic of livability, is the concept of experience. And Nick's touched on that a little bit. Where designers are in the business of creating great experiences for people. That's one of the core things that we do. And when you think about it, you go into a beautiful piece of public realm or a park, and you have a great experience in there. It's probably because it's been well designed, or a building. But I think, and you're probably more aware of it when things haven't been well designed. You know, you've got a product in your kitchen that's hard to use, and everyone says, oh, that hasn't been designed very well. The experience is bad. It was bad design. So we're in the experience business, but I'd like to take that a step further into the idea of designing systems and interactions as well. So they're experiences too. Now, sorry, that's a rather long way of getting back to the topic of livability. If you analyse the cities that are in the top 5, and you analyse the criteria behind the various livability indices around the world, a lot of that is experiential. So it's about creating the criteria, or measuring cities by how great an experience they are in there. So there's that link between design, creating great experiences, and creating livability. It's really, really important. And I'd argue that, councils need to do bins and roads and all that sort of thing, but local government's also in the experience business. You're creating great experiences for people. And that's one of the things that's, underpinning our livability rating here, is the experience that we have. One of the things then would be interesting to contemplate is that within the structure of many businesses, that bit's missing. So you will often have a chief executive officer, you'll have a chief information officer, a CFO, COO. My proposition is that within Adelaide City Council, we should have a chief design officer. I think that would be really powerful in terms of pushing forward our livability agenda and a whole bunch of other things. Now, that might sound a little bit nuts. Why would you put a person with funny glasses and a rather odd suit up at executive level within that environment? But here's the evidence. So Nick talked about businesses with creativity at their core. There was a bit of analysis done a couple of years ago, the Standards & Poor's Index 500 in the United States, and they analysed a bunch of businesses that were performing fairly well. And those businesses were in the creative space and in the experience space. And, list them off. Apple's the obvious one, but you've got businesses like Disney, Starbucks, Coca-Cola. There are some auto manufacturers in there, even Procter & Gamble, who would have thought. But you've got a bunch of businesses like that. The key to those businesses and the thing that made them stand out, they're performing it's almost 2.5 times above the performance of that stock market indice, is that they had design at executive level. They had a chief design officer or the equivalent thereof. So I think as part of implementing this plan, I think we should put design at the core for all. It's not just about buildings and spaces, it's about strategy and it's about experience. And a CDO sitting at the top echelons of Adelaide City Council, I think would be really important.
So that's our first horizontal idea, design across all of the 4 pillars, linking them. Thank you very much. Can I also hear now from Chris Bartlett?
Yeah, sure. Hi. So I thought about the topic that I was invited to come and sit on this panel around, the idea of racing to be a future city. And for me, I've heard the perspective that it's a race to be able to compete with other cities. For me, when I first read this, it was more, the meaning I took away was that it's a race to meet expectations. It's a race to meet expectations of the citizens. It's a race to meet the expectations of businesses in terms of how they want to engage with government, in terms of how they want to engage with each other, and in terms of what that could potentially be in the future. And I think if you start to think around the idea of smart cities, it's not a new concept. It's been around for almost a decade, but it is one which now people are starting to embrace, because what it means is basically this evolution around the digitisation of services that can be delivered within a city. And that basically is taking leaps and bounds in terms of what that can mean for citizens and business, in terms of the experience it can create, the quality of life it can create, and also the opportunities from cutting red tape to being able to access this fantastic broadband investment that you're going to have in this city. So I think that's basically when I thought about today, that was kind of what I took away from what it was going to be. And I think in terms of the characteristics of what would define a smart city, I was just hearing today and seeing the vision and strategy that this city has is quite phenomenal, because I think if you start to tick them off, networked. A smart city has to be networked, and that basically means you're leveraging information communication technology to deliver services, and you're doing that already in so many different ways. You've got this gig city which is going to be huge in terms of how you can deliver to those expectations. If you start to think around location awareness as another characteristic, you're doing things around smart parking, you're doing things around smart lighting, sensors, machine-to-machine type devices that are out there, and innovations in how you can apply those to improve the experience of people in the city. You're already making huge innovations and adopting that technology. And if I start to think around a third area around integrated services, so that's another characteristic. And I think that is an area where, if you start to look at case studies around the world, it's still an area which is a big challenge in terms of how you can create integrated experiences across those different verticals, across those different services, so that from a citizen's perspective, the services are integrated, they're seamless in terms of the experience that it creates. But also, on the back end of that, the data is there, the capabilities are there, the horizontals are there, that the government is getting benefits across the way those services are delivered, that they're doing it in an efficient way, and that they're getting insights that they can look to monetize in new revenue streams and cost efficiencies. And that's a really big part of what a smart city is all about.
Good, thank you very much. And now I'd just like to ask a couple of general questions, but this horizontal concept's clearly going to be one that's going to come up. I invite you, I'll ask individual people questions, but I invite others of you to join in, and you might have to raise your hand to me so I can see you. Nick, I'd like to start with you. South Australia's old identity sees itself as the festival city. The research from the City of Adelaide and Picture Adelaide talked about that historical understanding that we are bold and innovative in the Dunstan era, etc. And then there seemed to be like a big gap that people refer to, some kind of gap, the valley of death, I think, and where South Australia sort of felt itself to become risk averse. I want to ask you, Nick, to begin talking to me about the current state of creative approaches, cultural institutions, and then how that might link to growing cultural industries, creative industries.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that Adelaide was really socially progressive at various points of its history, and social progression leads to cultural progression. And I think Adelaide actually didn't drop the ball. I think just everyone just caught up. You know, every state has an amazing festival, and they saw that you can attract people to your cities really easily through intensifying activity. And Adelaide shows that really at its best, because the city will never have great volume like Sydney or Melbourne, but what the city has done so successfully is actually pinpoint intensity. And that's what we see in Mad March and various times of the year, that even with a small population of just over 1 million people, we can generate great intensity through focusing arts and cultural activities. The only problem now is the rest of the country and everything around the world, other places around the world have caught up, and they're doing the same thing. What Adelaide needs to do is actually continually to shapeshift and change the mix. I just think we've become too reliant on the festival model, and we just have this proliferation of festivals that actually don't speak to the rest of the economy and the rest of the livability and the experiences we have here. And I know some of you might say, well, at the end of each festival we have an economic report, but you know, you kind of want to glaze over that because everyone seems to have these amazing economic reports. I think the proof is in how it changes a city, how more restaurants are open more often, how the proliferation of small bars isn't just fracturing the recreation and bar scene, it's building it. I think you need to look at more sustainable ways of measuring the success. And I think that intense bursts are great, but what the city needs is to have a sustainable arts and cultural presence throughout the year. And it's a long-winded way of saying that I think arts and culture needs to become more ingrained into the way that the city presents itself, because this perfectly designed, livable city needs experiences, unique ones, and people need to feel that it's a special place to visit.
Thank you very much. Mayor, can I ask you to join into that talk about cultural creative industries? I'm sorry. Martin?
Oh, me.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Okay, if you look at that smart, green, livable, creative, what do you need to be livable? You've got to be smart, you've got to be creative, and you've got to be sustainable. So this whole... I encourage you to think about the architecture of this strategic plan. And full credit to our CEO, Mark Goldstone, and our directors, because we don't have silos. I mean, we're not in the business of storing grain. We're in the business of building this city. It's all about how it works vertically and how it works horizontally. So there is a lot of conversation and there's a lot of programs which work both horizontally and vertically at Adelaide City Council in order to deliver that smart, green, livable, creative platform. They really were thought through very carefully, Gabe.
Yep.
Because they are so... What Nick's saying is exactly right. If you don't have a creative city, you can't innovate. If you don't innovate, you can't commercialise. And that's the business side of it. And you could look at that through the same social context too. If you don't have a creative population, I think there's a happiness index here. There's a wellness index associated with this. And Gabe, you'd know that backwards.
It's all right, we've got it covered. We're working on it.
Well done. Well done. So that 4-point plan was really carefully architected both vertically and horizontally, because if you think of that visually, it actually makes it a lot stronger.
Thank you. David,
can I just pick up on that, on the importance of that point? Gone are the days when we can actually operate in silos and hold all the expertise in a particular area that we happen to be working in. And cities in particular reflect that. They are the most complex thing that humans have ever done. Think about it in those terms. The complexity is immense. The ability, and our understanding of them is not that great either at the moment, to be perfectly frank. And we had a bit of a chat about this during Open State. We had a guy from the UK, Indy Johar, an architect talking about that. And his mantra was, we've got to look at it goes back to that, you've got to be able to measure things in order to be able to respond to them. And so dealing, if you put in a bike lane, it's going to deliver a better health outcome. But how do we break that nexus between the silo of the health system and the silo of the transport system? And there's probably an accounting silo that actually prevents the two talking together. What are the things that we can do that actually break that so that you can pay for a bike lane because you're going to save money in health? That's the sort of stuff that that's the level of complexity that we're now having to deal with within cities. And that, if we can get that conversation going, that'll unlock an enormous amount of potential and really deal with the complexity of the organism we're dealing with.
Now, Chris is wanting to come in here.
Yeah, no, I'll just make a comment there. I think just around the integration of those services, it's one of the challenges of a smart city, particularly in the Australian context, is around the division of responsibility for some of those services. So when you start talking around state government, local government, federal government, where you all have different services being delivered, the opportunities to provide some sort of common infrastructure or some sort of common horizontal investment across those are huge. And I do think that that's where Adelaide has a really big advantage over a city like Sydney, where you have so many different municipalities and different city councils all trying to cooperate. At least here you have a much better integrated local, state opportunities around some of that horizontal type offerings or services that could underpin those services is quite significant here.
So you're really talking about a different approach to budget accounting in a Westminster political system. Now that's being done in a few places in the world, and it's not beyond the bounds of possibility to create pools of integrated funding that work in that way. Sandy, are you wanting to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say that, one of the themes of this for me is that we've looked at some world firsts here today. We're talking about world's first carbon neutral city, world's first gig city. And I think there are so many things that South Australia has been world first for, but it's not necessarily lived and experienced by our population. So even something like you're talking about integrated policy making, putting health outcomes at the centre of what we do in transport and planning and environment is actually South Australia is recognised in the world for health in all policies and being the Adelaide statement in terms of setting some of those parameters in government right back over the last years. So right from your work, Gabe, with the Wellbeing Index and the SAMRI work, there are so many parts of this that we can tap into in South Australia, and it does exist. But my challenge that I'm worried about here, and we're circling around it, is how do we get it from this room of people who experience and do it to actually be what people's lived experience is in the population? How do we get the people of Adelaide and the subs and the community say, this is what's great about my city and I can feel that it is carbon neutral, I can feel that it's vibrant. And I think that translation, that next step is one of our biggest challenges.
Yeah, Minister?
I might just pick up on the point of creativity and how intrinsic that is to where we're going and the sort of areas I have responsibility for. Sister City in Austin, Texas has a very famous music festival, South by Southwest. I spent some time with one of the founders of the South by Southwest Festival when the same trip I visited Chattanooga, and he was talking about a bit over a decade ago when South by Southwest introduced a tech and startup portion of that, and the tension that created initially with the purists who were concerned that this music festival is going to subsidise this startup nonsense, and over a decade it's now turned around where the thousands and thousands of young entrepreneurs from right around the world, including many from Adelaide, go to South by Southwest to pitch their ideas in tech startup areas, and this part of the festival now heavily subsidises the music part.
That's very cool. Now, I've heard that happen here in the film industry. They were doing that some years ago, but we could do that tomorrow across all of our festivals and events, couldn't we?
Yes, we could.
Well, it seems like a good plan. Seems like another one to take home. Anyone got any other comments on that?
Well, I was just going to say, and we even went to South by Southwest, the Premier did, to launch the Adelaide to Zero Carbon Neutral Challenge, and it was absolutely tapping into that sense that green, livable, smart, creative, and South by Southwest probably epitomises that in a place. So that was where the Premier launched our challenge.
Okay, so do you think that the population of South Australia understands the excitement that I felt when I heard the Minister and the Mayor speak this morning? I believed both of you. I thought it was really coherent. It was exciting. You know, I could tell it was up to date. I could see that the state government and the Adelaide City Council had gone looking around the world and was aiming at the best. But do you think the whole of our population knows about this?
I have an answer for that. Gabe, we need the support of our media to get that message out. It is that critical to this transformation, which we often talk about in terms of Adelaide and South Australia, and I'm sure the Minister will echo me on this, is that everybody must play a role in terms of contributing and getting this message out there. And it's the only way it's going to work, to be honest.
But realistically, is the media going to do that? Media is often about selling newspapers or capturing eyeballs for money. They don't have the job of promoting what we're doing. They have a different agenda often. So we can't really just sit back and rely on that. Anyone got any other ideas? Minister, you've got some comment?
I might add on to what the Lord Mayor has just said. It was interesting in Chattanooga. I think there were a couple of articles that the local media did about a South Australian delegation visiting and just reinforcing how a world leader Chattanooga is. The local media in Chattanooga use every opportunity to reinforce what's good about their city and the change that's going on. And I think that's changing in Adelaide, slowly. I did hear some commentary around the Lonely Planet top 5 regions announcement this week. And it ranged from a very congratulatory and almost it was I think a bit of a reflection in some media about there is good reason to celebrate South Australia. To some other commentary about why would you choose South Australia. So it is changing, but it's not easy.
David?
Maybe part of the answer lies in how we engage with the community as well. I think there's a really important piece of work that needs to be done on the community engagement piece. It's at least moved away from announce and defend, because we know that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But we're as designers, we engage a lot, and there are processes that we know work far better than others. A lot of them are about setting the vision, which is kind of what this document is doing, setting vision, but also putting honest boundaries around things and saying, look, we can go to some areas, some of these other areas are no-go, and actually having some honest conversations around them as well. I think we try to manage the no-go stuff and hope it doesn't blow up in our face. And that just generates cynicism.
Well, that's the risk thing too, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone's got their own business or political risk to manage, and everyone has them. It's not just governments that have those. Everyone has to manage risk. So that can sometimes stifle the communication. Nick, have you got something you want to add about connecting with people and the long-term relationship and trust that you can build around a message?
I think that in a future city, the mainstream media has a lesser role to play. We're all self-publishing, and I think that more and more as we progress, the way that you kind of communicate with your constituency is a more personalised approach. I think the era of marketing departments and comms departments trying to push messages out that are kind of disconnected from the core of what you're trying to do, it's kind of old-fashioned. So to hear the Minister and the Lord Mayor really selling a plan that they see as really critical to our state is really important, because what we need is strong leaders, we need authors, we need people that believe in ideas, and we need to self-publish those ideas, because that's how we kind of communicate in the future. We're not going to communicate through the mass media. And the way you kind of nurture respect and people having faith in what you do is being consistent with those messages and ensuring that people want to know more about what you're trying to achieve. So not having throwaway lines, continually building on the things that you've done in the past. And I think that the 24-hour media cycle is already gone because people are bored with it. And I think that the way that you nurture support of your constituents, your audience, your customers or your clients is about communicating very personally with them and building on things in a very consistent way rather than press releases and one-line grabs.
Chris, were you signalling me? Or Sandy is?
Well, I was going to agree. From earlier we talked about the importance of KPIs, and I think there's so much credibility in what the Adelaide City Council has done with the KPIs and the deliverables that's going to be in this plan. But I also think there's something that's almost a bigger umbrella than that, and that is kind of the vibe. I'm channeling the castle here, but it's the vibe. It's the vibe in Vibrant. And so what does it feel like? Yeah. What does it taste like? And I think, the small bars is a great example for me, that mainstream media did love to bag those, except too many people were having too much fun. And it's, again, like renewables. A lot of people wanted to blame, everything on renewables, and I was quite enjoying the hashtag stuff I can blame on renewables a week or two ago. And it's counterintuitive, because people have got solar panels, they've seen what wind farms can do, and it just doesn't feel right to them. And if you're trying to send a message that's counter to the prevailing vibe, it's hard to do. And so I think that we have a great vibe about Adelaide being livable. We've got credibility under it being smart. We've got credibility in the world stage about us being green and carbon neutral, and we've got absolute credibility from the festivals and the art gallery, that I don't think you can undermine that vibe. So it's how do we take that vibe to the experience and to the conversation.
Thank you. Martin, you were...
Look, I think we need to address, the tall poppy syndrome at its cause. We must celebrate our successes, without fear or favour. If we stuff up, and governments stuff up, all levels of government at some point in time will stuff up, we probably deserve a roasting. But when we do things well, when our community does things well, when our entrepreneurs do things well, when our citizens do things well, there's some great social causes, I must say, in the City of Adelaide. The Social Venture Incubator program, which I went to last night, was just extraordinary, some of the creativity and innovation there. We need to shout this stuff to the rafters, because I think we've got to address the bear in the room, and it's cultural. We've got to be more confident about success. We need to be more confident about ourselves succeeding and be proud of that, and we need to pat each other on the back when we do it. And I think that's the heart of the issue. South Australia is, and I agree with Nick, the future is here. It's now. But we need to acknowledge that, and there was an outstandingly good fashion show at the gallery, and it was just brilliant. And that was creativity and innovation at work. But this kind of stuff is happening every day, and we just need to get it out there. I think that's the absolute cause of it.
Chris, I think you're looking at me. Are you?
No, that's a...
No. Okay, good. I think it's time to take some questions from you. This was a good conversation. There's a couple of key themes that are emerging, but let's hear what the audience has got. Yes, here's a question. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, hello. Hi, my name is Valdis from the Solar Project. Today the talk is about the race to the future. We've got an electric car at the front. We're talking about smart creative. I think probably the epitome of smart creative is, the new Tesla cars, super fast, super high tech, all of that. I've heard talk, for probably about 6 months now about bringing a new all-electric Formula E racing to Adelaide, and I think the Lord Mayor and other people on the panel have supported it. So I just want to know what the update of that is, to bring that to Adelaide, to put a spotlight on Adelaide's creativity, especially with the news that maybe it's going to be lost to Sydney, which we are hearing about this month.
Martin, any update on that, just quickly?
Well, I might share this one with the Minister.
Privately.
There are 700 electric vehicles registered on the streets of South Australia now. There are 22,000 hybrid vehicles registered in South Australia today. And that's in many ways why we announced the rollout of electric vehicle charging points on our city streets, and quite clearly it's something I think which is going to take us all by surprise. It will grow exponentially. And they're all modelling, price parity on electric vehicles with combustion engines in the not too distant future. And once you get price parity, you just wait to see how quickly it changes. So Valdis is very passionate about Formula E. I receive correspondence from Valdis very frequently, and it's great. I mean, it's possibly the ultimate demonstration project. For the same reasons that we think that those electric vehicle charging points on our city streets will actually be a terrific demonstration project. because it's educational. Valdis, in answer to your question, I'm going to hand you to the Minister.
Or indeed to me.
Do you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah. So I think it is still one that's in the mix. But I think what the Lord Mayor's talked about is that there are lots of great demonstration projects that we could do and things that will change behaviour. And I suppose the thing that I put out as the challenge is, how do you actually get that behaviour change? How do you change the way we live and feel? Because it's comfortable to support something, but what will change? And so while the Formula E has lots of great parts to it in demonstration mode, I actually think the practical part of, driving the Mitsubishi PHEV like I do and having the plug-in stations that the Lord Mayor's enabling us to do is another way of living that demonstration, so that people know it's real and they can do it and other people are doing it. And you talk to the people in Silicon Valley about the way that Teslas are being fought over and BMWs running in with their i vehicles, and actually there's lots of different ways to do the demonstration part. And I think here'd be my challenge. It's not always government who needs to be doing all of the parts of that demonstration. There are a lot of parts for business, there's a lot of parts for community, and there's a lot of things that just take on a life when they're grabbed by people rather than just government doing our demonstration part. So there is a bit of a spur for lots of creativity to be in that, not just the traditional mode.
Can I add to that? That really brings us to the question of prototypes, doesn't it? And implementation, taking the aligned government positions and then seeing what they can actually mean in real life and real practice. What's the panel's view on that question, to extend that idea that Sandy launched about how can the power of the people and the community be unlocked in innovation and actual prototypes of new ideas?
I'll try and tackle that one. I mean, prototypes are really, really important because if we wait around to get all the evidence before we act, we'll never get the evidence.
Yep.
It's just not going to be there with some of this stuff. So prototyping is about getting enough evidence to say, yeah, we're comfortable to act, let's go do something, and then we freely acknowledge it's not going to be perfect, we've got to tune it after that. And I think getting the community involved in that process might be quite interesting, because there is risk-taking involved. You're being open about the fact that it won't be perfect in the first place, and these are the things that we actually don't know about, but let's give that a go. The parklets and things around town that have been around for a few years are interesting examples of that. So that prototyping process is a design process, basically. So, yeah.
Minister, are you looking?
Yeah, it is important. I think the topic today, the race to the future city, there is a massive first mover advantage in a lot of what we do. I spoke about our ambitions for gig city Adelaide. Yeah, others will catch up, but when you're the first, you attract the attention, you have that advantage. And it's reflected in a lot of things Adelaide do. At SAMRI, the interdisciplinary approach with all our research institutions involved is a new way, is a new prototype of looking to solve very complex health problems and health issues. So I think it's something we do well in Adelaide. We've talked about our history in Adelaide of being the first for things, whether it's women voting, decriminalising homosexuality. There's a lot of firsts we've had in Adelaide. So that prototyping in our social democracy and in the way we do research is important, and being the first to do something shines a spotlight and is a very important thing.
So it's a good strategy. And what we're seeing is a lot of that good strategy discussed today, and I think what the panel is saying, let's do more of it. And let's not just rely on governments to pay for the first bit of it necessarily, I think, too, I'm hearing. Martin, are you looking at me? Because I'm side on, I can't quite see whether people are just being friendly or...
I am. Gabe, I am being friendly. But, thank you for the opportunity to chat. I think also, from a government level at least, leading by example, like walking the walk, we've reduced our electricity bill by $800,000 as a result of battery storage technology, solar PV, lighting conversions, a whole range of things. And when you have that conversation with the ratepayer, you have their undivided attention. So, but I also think policy, programs, incentives, things like the Sustainable Incentive Scheme, which we've partnered with Sandy and the team, and Minister Ian Hunter with regards to incentivising people within the City of Adelaide to put in battery storage technology and solar PV and lighting and electric vehicle charging points and a whole host of things. Solar saver programs, partnerships. So I think there's a leadership role for government. I don't think government needs to do everything, but sometimes when it's really new, sometimes we've got to do a demonstration project to say, look, you know, we can do this, we've done all the research, we can de-risk it, we can show you how you can de-risk it, and we can communicate the benefits.
Thank you very much. And we've only got one last question which I've been asked to ask, so I will. So a last comment from everybody. I misheard something the Minister said, and I heard entrepreneurs when he said entrepreneur, but I actually thought the entrepreneur was an interesting thought. It takes us to smart technology. And I just want to comment from all of you about, I know we've got some structures in place to do some hubs and some new investment monies coming in. Is there anything else we need to do with the human capital in South Australia, from kids right across the life course, because there are entrepreneurs now, many female entrepreneurs over 60, in fact, worldwide. It's a new trend. So some final comments on the human capital and how we raise the confidence of our people of all ages across not just the City of Adelaide, but the whole of South Australia. A final comment.
It's critically important. There are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in a wide range of what we do.
Yep.
There are the tech startup is heavily male dominated. There are organisations changing the face of that in Adelaide, like Women in Innovation, but it's right across the span. We're doing a bunch of work at the moment in the ageing space and how to tap into a lot of talent. People have an idea of an entrepreneur being a geeky young bloke in their back room making apps for an iPhone. But it is a lot more than that, and in so many different spaces.
Yeah, because you can start up new systems and processes and products, can't you? Not just using tech, but not for tech.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we look in the ageing space, for example, as we are an ageing population, particularly in South Australia, the challenges that we need for people to live longer and live better in their own home, and the solutions that we come up with for that are going to be critically important to not just this state, but the technology and the services we can export.
Yeah, excellent. Sandy?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you had the two photos, Minister, it was the old male geeks and the new male geeks, and I said, where are the women? And I reckon the women are going to be in a different space right now, because it's not necessarily the building of the thing, it's the building of the great thing that you can use that tech with, that I'm pretty excited about. But Gabe, my closing comment would be about the people side of this, is that in climate change and in the Environment Department, often people sort of think, oh, we're only worried about the environment, and that's a closed conversation. And actually, when you work with people in parks, when you're looking at the way that people talk about wanting to have climate change action, it is all about the people and the way that people interact with our environment that is where the real power and strength is. So that's something that I'm really keen to see, whether it be nature-based tourism, whether it be healthy parks, healthy people, whether it be carbon neutral Adelaide. It is that way that people intersect and what can be great from that.
So you're really thinking they're all new businesses? They're all new service businesses to make the experience of Adelaide much better.
And it's not going to be the government that runs the best new nature-based tourism hotel. It's going to be some great entrepreneur or some private sector person that builds on what we have managed to do so well in government, of creating a great park, a great experience, a great KI wilderness trail, all of these amazing things. And now come on down and take what government's done and make it even a product that gives South Australians jobs.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think in terms of one of the things that goes with smart cities is data, and we heard about the extraordinary amount of data that's being captured today, but also here in Adelaide, as you start to roll out the whole smart city initiatives and realise the vision, there'll be a whole amount of information which will be available, and I think tapping into that and making that available to people who have the will and interest to innovate and explore the potential ways that data could change people's lives. I think there's lots of examples now of hackathons, accelerators, there's stuff going which is industry sponsored as well as government sponsored. And I think just making that data available and putting the right incentives and structure around the ideas that come out of that to make them successful, to see them adopted, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Thank you.
I think the thing that we do need is symbols of progress, and really highlight our most talented and best and brightest. We need to pick winners and support them. For example, in the APY lands north of here, some of the best Aboriginal art's being produced in the world here, and it's been celebrated. Ironically, you can't see it in Adelaide and you can't buy it in Adelaide. And another example is, last Sunday night I went to one of the most memorable events that I've ever seen in Adelaide. It was a young designer, Paolo Sebastian, and it was in a tent in Victoria Square. I could have been in any city in the world because I saw a creative genius at work, 27 years of age, and could rock it with anyone in the world. Those two things are kind of great examples that they're symbols of progress in our city and state, and they lead the way, because in 500 years' time, the only thing that our civilization will remember is the very creative. Because if you look back 500 years ago, the only thing we remember is the most creative from 500 years ago. So it's those best and brightest, the talented, that we need to kind of accelerate and put up on a pedestal and support them as symbols of progress to give everyone a sense of optimism.
David.
Look, the people side of things is the most crucial bit, I think. I've had the absolute privilege with some other people of working with a couple of guys, David Patterson and Matt Anderson, on the Social Capital project that they've been cooking up for the last couple of years here in Adelaide, which is all around social entrepreneurship. And they managed to get 200 people together for a conference during Entrepreneurs Week down in Light Square in about 2 weeks' notice, with some absolutely fabulous stuff. So the energy that's in that area around human capital, I think, is untapped as yet here, and I think the intimacy of our city and the scale it places us perfectly to really, propel that. And their tagline is for Adelaide to become the Silicon Valley of social entrepreneurship. So that people bit, that's what this is all about.
Martin.
I'm very pleased that we're winding up on this note, that it's so true if you look at history. It is, as Nick said, it's actually the social initiatives which people remember. We can build great bridges, we can build great buildings, we can do wonderful things, and they're all very important to our city. But sometimes the lasting legacy is actually those of social change. And I think that sits incredibly well with South Australia, because if you look at our long DNA as a state and as a city, we've been social pioneers to some degree. So let's tap back into that. But I think we need to be creative. I also think we need to be curious. Curiosity is a really interesting word, but if you keep being curious and you challenge things and you question things and you ask whether you can do it better or you can do it differently, I think that's really important. But this smart, green, livable, creative, just use that as a lens, use that as a framework, apply it how you best see it to be applied. But I think that kind of framework, along with a lot of good partnerships, actually could be very much our ticket to a different future.
Well, then on that note, we're going to have to just about wrap up. I would just like to finalise by saying that the bonds of love for each person only seem to last about 2.25 generations. No one will remember most of us in a very short amount of time. And turns out that compared to the tall story of history, we're only here for a moment. This is the moment that the Mayor talked about, that we have to act in, and we are the people who happen to be, by happenstance, living here together in this city. So we are the people who can take this incredible leadership and really push it, give it a really big shove, so that when we're dead and gone, which will be very soon, we leave a legacy on behalf of our future city, which is the one we're talking about. Thank you so very much.